This week, I'm not using any paint, okay? I probably won't even use a paintbrush. Well, maybe a chip brush, but I'm going to be taking this bench right here and I'm going to be refinishing it. We're not going to be touching it with paint. We're going to just strip it all down and refinish it. If you guys want to see how I refinish a piece of furniture, stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Crys'Dawna. If you are new here, please hit the subscribe button and then hit the bell and you'll get all the latest videos. If you are not new here and you're returning, welcome back, friends and family. I am so glad that you are here. So you did hear me right. I will not be painting anything this week. I did a little bit of thrifting out in Luxembourg, probably 7 months ago, and I found this this bench, okay? I do have a friend who is an antique dealer and she looked at it. There's too much damage on this to be worth anything anyways, but it's not worth anything. But even if it was something that would be worth something, there's too much damage, so it wouldn't be worth very much. So one thing a disclaimer I want to say to you guys is that if you are flipping furniture for a profit and you come across a piece that is super unique and really good shape and you're not quite sure if it's an antique, so antique is 100 years old or more, okay? If you come across a piece of furniture and you're not quite sure of the value of it, make sure that you have someone look at it first, especially if you're flipping furniture, because you may be able to flip that for more than if you paint it, okay? So, and there is a misconception. I think sometimes people just think that if something's vintage or antique that it's worth something. That's not necessarily the case. Now, even if you're refinishing a piece of furniture, so this piece of furniture right here, I'm going to refinish it. I'm going to strip this old patina off and refresh it, put some hemp oil on it, lighten up this wood so that I can see the wood grain in it. If you did that to an antique that was actually worth something, you would devalue it. So as soon as you touch an antique that actually has value, whether it's stripping it off, whether it's doing anything you do to it, paint, stripping it off and refinishing it, you will devalue it, okay? Now, for me, this piece, I do not plan on selling it. I'm going to keep it, and I do not like the finish on it right now. And I'll get a little bit close. It's pretty rough. It's not a nice finish on there. It's discolored and we've got a little damage. I actually have this little piece right here that is off of the leg that we're gonna repair. So it's not in the best shape ever, but that's just one disclaimer I want to say, is that if it is a piece that you think could be of value, make sure that you check it out first, because again, you may, especially if you're selling furniture, you may be able to make more on it selling it as is, okay? With that also being said, people are only going to pay, it doesn't matter how much something is worth. Let's say this bench is worth $3,000. It's not, but let's say that it was worth $3,000. It's only worth what someone's going to pay for it, okay? So there's that flip side of that, is that you have this antique. We're just gonna pretend like this is a valuable antique. It's not. It is not. I'm gonna say it again, it's not. But let's say that this was a valuable antique and it was worth $3,000, but you have it in your store, or you're trying to sell it, and it sits and sits and sits and sits and sits for months and months. That's not good business practice. So either you reach out to someone who is an antique dealer, see if they want to buy it. If they don't, sometimes this is in business and you have no choice but to do something with it, whether it's refinish it or paint it, because sometimes it's worth more to somebody else refinished or painted than it is in its original state. I hope that makes sense. There are many pieces that I will not paint. I won't touch them with paint. I think that you should know the difference between pieces that should be painted and pieces that shouldn't be painted. And so this is one that I'm going to refinish, because I already can tell. I've refinished a piece like this before, and I can tell that it's going to be beautiful when I'm done. So with that being said, all I ask for you is to educate yourself on the pieces that you are painting, and also, if you're keeping it for yourself, do whatever you want with it. But if you're reselling it as a business aspect, you may be able to get more money out of it reselling it as is than painting it. So hopefully that makes sense. I know I was all over the place. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not a wood purist by any means. There are some people who will paint anything and everything, and I think that sometimes that's sad because I have, like, you know, you're gonna see this, it's a little bit messy. I had to move my buffet. This piece back here behind my buffet, you can see it. I put a little bit of gold gilding on it because it's in pretty rough shape. It would never be worth anything, but it's beautiful. The wood is beautiful, and I just can't paint it. I just can't. So just educate yourself on what you're painting and what you're not painting, okay? And also that goes with educate yourself on what is actually an antique and what is not an antique, because there's quite a few people out there who are like, that's an antique. No, it's not. 100 years or more is an antique. And just because it was your great grandma's from the 60s and it's valuable to you and has a value to you, does not mean it's got an intrinsic value to you and your family, does not mean it has a value. I know that sounds really mean. I say that with all the love in my heart, but just because it's valuable to you because it was your grandpa's who passed away does not mean that it's actually valuable. So understand that. I get a lot of people with waterfall furniture. They get really up in arms when you paint it, but you know, that furniture was not, it's not quality. It was made in the Great Depression. It's veneer. It was a way to make cheaper furniture, high-end cheaper furniture during the Great Depression. And so, you know, just educate yourself on furniture before you give advice about furniture is all I ask. Okay, so let's start refinishing this. I am gonna clean it really well. I have a feeling it's gonna be dirty, 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 but I'm gonna get some close-ups for you and I'm gonna show you some of the finish and the damage and how dirty it is and all the things. Here's an overview of the bench. It is in pretty rough shape, and again, I'm planning on keeping it. And although I appreciate a good patina and a good aged worn look, I wasn't feeling it. So I wanted to refinish this piece. There's little speckles of paint on it. I'm assuming someone maybe painted their wall and it was just in the crossfire. Maybe there was a pad on here or someone taped it. I'm not quite sure. The inside's pretty rough. So what I'm going to do with this piece is I'm going to refinish it to give it just new life and rejuvenate it. So the first step is for me to clean it. I realize that I'm going to strip the finish off, but I want to clean the inside and the outside. I'm not going to pull this apart and refinish the inside. So the inside really needs to be clean. And so I'm just going to clean the outside as well. Even though I'm going to be stripping it, I just still want to clean it and make sure I get all the dust and dirt and grime off. Again, I said I'm going to clean it, so that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to clean the entire piece. I'm going to clean the inside really well. I'll vacuum the inside as well to get any kind of loose particles out. But I'm going to clean it really well because it is super dirty, and even though I'm going to be using a chemical stripper on it, I don't want to, if I'm going to clean the inside anyways, I just would rather clean the outside just to kind of get an idea of where I'm at. When I clean it, sometimes with these old finishes, you may be starting to pull the finish off as well. So this will give me kind of an idea of a starting point once I have it all nice and clean and I can step back and look at it. Okay, so this tool is a paint scraper. I could go in right away with my chemical stripper, but because this finish is just so compromised and so brittle, I want to save myself some chemical stripper, because if I go in with a chemical stripper, I'm going to have to do it a few times. But if I pull the finish off with my paint scraper, not only will that save me from having to use more chemical stripper, but then it's just easy. If you look at how easy this is, I'm just pulling it and it is just flaking off. So that's what I'm doing first, is going through all the flat areas on the top, and I'm just using a paint scraper and I am just scraping that pre-existing finish off.
You can see the difference right here. The left is what I pulled off with the paint scraper, the right is still the other finish. So once I'm done scraping everything on all the flat surfaces, now I'm gonna go in with my chemical stripper. Remember, I live in Germany, and so I have a different chemical stripper. I'm going to add the chemical stripper to everything, and I like to work in sections. So when I am refinishing a piece, I kind of am methodical about it. I do the harder parts first, so obviously the spindles, and then I work in little sections. So I'm adding the chemical stripper and I'll let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then I come in with some fine steel wool and I start scrubbing it off, okay? I am going to have to repeat this process on probably everything except for the areas where I used that paint scraper. So I'm just going to go in and scrape with my steel wool, or scrub with my steel wool, all of the stripper in the area that I'm working on. So I'm focusing on this one little area for you for the video. So you'll just see these, first 4 or 5 spindles and that top left-hand area of the bench so that you can see my process. So this is the first step after I've scraped it, is adding that stripper and then scrubbing it off with the steel wool. I'm doing my second pass now. I have applied the stripper, I scrubbed it off with the steel wool. Now I'm going to apply another layer of the stripper on that area. I'm going to let it sit for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I'm going to scrub it off again with the steel wool. For this finish, it's not super thick, so 2 passes was enough for this area. So some pieces, they may require more. Some pieces will only require 1. Some pieces, the finish is so brittle that you can probably even just take it all off when you're in the cleaning process. You're going to see me come in with something a little bit different. So I have a brush. This is a plastic black bristled brush. And I'm going to scrub the spindles and scrub all the little cracks and crevices to get everything out of it to make sure that this second pass is my last pass. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to scrub all those areas. Then I'm going to take the steel wool, scrub all of that stuff off, and that will be my last pass on this section. Remember, I said I'm methodical, so I'll work on this section, I'll work over to the right, I'll do the handles, I'll do all the other stuff, and I'm gonna show you the seat of the bench as well. But I work in sections when I am refinishing a piece and stripping. Also, I wanna note, if you're using a bristle brush, do not use a one with steel bristles, not a brass brush, not a silver brush. Make sure that you are using one that is the plastic so it's softer, because you do not want to make scratches in your wood. I'm just going to take some shop towels and try to wipe off all the excess that I can. Later on, I'm going to go over it with mineral spirits, but that is the last part I do before I move on to the next section. I'm going to work on the seat of this piece. I'm going to put a layer of stripper on. Of course, the finish is pretty much always already removed off of here, but I'm going to put a layer of the stripper on and I'm going to allow it to sit for another 15-20 minutes, and then I'm going to scrape it off with my plastic scraper that has the little scoop at the end. I don't like using metal scrapers when I am using the chemical stripper because the finish has pretty much come off of it already, and I don't want to run the risk of scratching it. The only time I use a metal scraper is the very first one that you saw, and that was to scrape the finish off, and you pull it off when you're using those. You don't scrape against the grain. So when you're doing any kind of finish, you're scraping with a metal scraper. If you don't have a plastic one, make sure that you go with the grain. Now I'm going to flip the bench on its back so that I can apply the chemical stripper on here, and it can just sit on its back, so when I'm scrubbing and stuff, I'm not having to worry about, you know, sitting down on the ground and trying to scrunch over. I can either lean over this or just, I have better access. That's why I put it on its back. So I'm going to put a layer of this on here. Again, let it sit for the allotted time and come back. There it is again, my plastic black bristled brush. Again, they're considered wire brushes, but this is a black bristle. This is not wires. This doesn't have the brass wires, the silver wires. This is the plastic ones. So this is what you're going to want to use if you've got areas that are ornate. And then I take a shop towel after I've scrubbed everything and I wrap it in there and I scrub it with it being wrapped so that I can not only strip the rest of it, but pull off the excess, and it makes it easier to get it out of all those nooks and crannies. The next step after I'm done stripping the finish completely off is using mineral spirits. So this is going to have a threefold purpose. I'm using fine steel wool and I dip it into my mineral spirits, and not only does this help neutralize the stripper so that it stops the stripping process, but two, it's going to help me get all of the residual off that I didn't get off from cleaning before. So I get all of the, if there's any kind of stripper residue left over. And then three, this is going to help open the wood grain. So that way, when I go to stain it later, it's open and the stain takes really nicely. So this is my next step, is to take that mineral spirits and clean this piece and scrub it in really well. There were pieces from the leg, chunks of wood that were taken off, so I'm going to use some Titebond wood glue and I'm going to reapply these. Now, instead of using a clamp because it's on the corner, I'm going to use my Stikk's tape and I'm going to tape it really well. I'm going to wipe away all of the glue and then I'm going to actually wrap around the bottom. So I'm going to take the tape on the bottom, I'm going to wrap it around as hard as I can to create a suction or a clamp with my tape, and then I will let it sit and dry, and then when I pull it off later, the wood will be adhered and fixed. Before I move on to the next step, I'm going to allow this bench to sit for 24 hours because I want it to fully dry. Because I'm going to go in with my Surf Prep 3x4 electric ray and I'm going to sand it. So I'm using a fine 10 millimeter foam sanding pad. I am going to sand down this entire piece. Now, I'm using the fine. The fine is roughly about a 120 grit. And the reason why I'm using this is because I don't want to close up the wood grain, but I do want to smooth everything out and I want to just get any other excess finish off that I can. So I'm going to go through this entire piece and I am going to just sand it lightly with my fine grit sandpaper, and that way it will be ready for stain. I want to make sure I get all the dust off, so I'm going to just take a cheap chip brush and I'm going to just dust all the excess off of this piece first, and then I'm going to start staining it. So here's the thing about me using the stain on this piece. I am going to be using gel stain, but I am going to be using it almost as a rejuvenating type stain, almost like a polishing, if you will. So I'm using Walnut No Pain Gel Stain by Dixie Belle. But what I'm going to do, because you're going to need an applicator pad and you're going to need a cheap chip brush, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be applying it and I'm actually going to be wiping it back. So I'm not staining this to necessarily change the color, as I'm staining this to bring color into the piece and rejuvenate it, but not make it darker. So you will see me apply the No Pain Gel Stain, and then you will see me wipe it back right away. I'm also going to wipe it back with a microfiber cloth because I'm just wanting to kind of give it a facelift. I'm not trying to stain it really dark like you can see right here. So in this process, you're going to see me wipe it away because I just want to give it a little bit of a fresh color. All right, so it started raining outside. I had to bring it in the overhang, underneath the overhang. So those little dots I wiped away the water, but it doesn't matter. The stain is going to erase all of it anyway. So what I'm doing is I'm going over this piece with the stain and I'm just rejuvenating the wood and I'm making it beautiful. I'm not putting it on thick. I'm not trying to change the color. I'm just trying to add a little bit more life into this wood. Now that I've applied my stain to this piece, it needs to sit for 72 hours. I'm going to allow it to sit for 72 hours, and then I'm going to come and put my hemp seed oil on it. Okay, so you're going to need a clean, cheap chip brush and your hemp seed oil. I'm going to apply this generously to my entire piece. Because this has dried for 72 hours, this will soak in. So what I do is I apply it to the entire piece and then I let it sit overnight. And when I come back, whatever has soaked in is the areas where it really needed it. If there are pools of stuff, I wipe it away. You can do multiple layers if you want. So normally what I do is if there is no hemp seed oil left on a piece that I usually do a second coat because I know that it was really thirsty and needed it. If there's pooling still left after 24 hours, then normally I don't put another coat of it on. Hemp seed oil is a really great sealer. This is a final sealer. You can use it over paint as well. Hemp seed oil is food safe as well, and sometimes your dogs may try to lick it. It's okay. It's not toxic to them. This stain is completely dried. If they do, just tell them to go away from it. But hemp seed oil is good it's food safe, so it's good for cutting boards and butcher blocks and stuff like that. So that's why I put this little skit of Cannon in this. Promise no dogs were harmed in this making. He just really likes hemp seed oil.
Cannon, what are you doing? What are you doing?
You can see on here where there are some areas where it's already soaked in. So after a few hours, it'll soak in, but I like to let it sit overnight just to allow it to do its thing entirely.
Cannon. Hey. 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 Don't do it. Don't.
Okay, so this is the next day. You can see that most of it is soaked in. There are some areas where it's pooling. So I'm not going to put a second coat on because this wood is not as dry as I thought it was going to be. So we're going to pull any of the areas that are pulling, we're going to pull that off with a microfiber cloth. Once I'm done pulling it off with the microfiber cloth, I'm going to go over it with another clean microfiber cloth and just kind of buff it in a little bit. But the finish on it is so smooth. It's amazing. Hemp oil will make your wood on your furniture feel super, super smooth.
Okay everybody, so this piece is done. I hope you enjoyed that video. I know it was a little bit different than we normally do, but I have had to restore quite a few pieces throughout the years of my business, and I wanted to show you how I do it. There are different ways. There's tons of other people who do restorations different ways. I didn't necessarily restore this as I just refinished it. So I stripped everything down and just gave it a fresh look for years to come. So I'm going to be keeping this piece. I love it. I hope you guys love it too. Again, if you are not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Remember, everything I use will be in the description below. Remember, I live in Germany, and so some products like stripper, the chemical stripper and stuff like that, if you are located in a different country, you'll have to find what is the best in your country. But I try to put most things I use in the description below through like an Amazon link or something like that to where you can find it, whether it be steel wool or paint scraper. So there are a few products that you won't be able to get in the country that you live in that's exactly the same as what I use, i.e. the paint stripper. But you can, go to your local hardware store and ask them what the best paint stripper is that they have, or finish stripper, or lacquer stripper, or whatever you want to call it, chemical stripper. So here is the piece. I am going to have, it's so smooth. You guys, I cannot believe, that is another thing I love about using hemp oil is it is so smooth. It just has like this buttery feel to it. It does have a more matte finish, but this is just so beautiful. I cannot believe, I knew that it was going to be beautiful, but I can't believe how beautiful the colors are on it. So I'm going to show you guys a video of it. I'm going to show you some nice staged pictures, so stay tuned. Again, remember, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Happy creating!
Think about me one more time before you go. Someday you'll know. Someday you'll know. I already know what I'm going to say. I've been feeling this way for far too long.